There we go. All right. You're listening to 91.5 WUML Lowell, Blues Deluxe, and it's my pleasure and honor to have Tom Rush with me today. How are you, Tom?
I'm honored to be here. Feeling
Thank you.
fine.
So, Tom, I look back through your history and you go all the way back. You started in 61. You were in college, 59, 60, 61 at Harvard at the time. And you
I
put out,
started out on co-
go
I
ahead,
started out on college radio,
like me. That's great.
WHRB. I had a little 30-minute show on Wednesday evenings, I think, called Balladeers, and I would have live guests come on, and we'd
And
sing
who
some songs
who'd you have
together.
for
And
live guests? What types of live guests did you
well,
have?
I inherited the show, um, and it had always been just local folkies that were the guests. And I decided I would branch out and I would try to get well-known artists who were coming through town. And I had Pete Seeger, I had Jesse Lone Cat Fuller on at one point, who was a treat, playing playing his fatdella and 12-string and harmonica on a neck rack, and singing and tap dancing with his other foot. It was an act made for radio. Um, and Odetta came on. I can't remember who else. And of course, I also hosted the local folks. Baez was a guest at one point, and I'm sure Jeff Muldar and Queskin were on the show. But it was an interesting way to. It actually got me out into the world, because I had to go to the hootenannies, the open mics, and invite people to pick people that I would like to have come on the show. And I discovered I could get in for free if I had a guitar with me. And then I discovered I could get in for free if I had a guitar case with me. So I'd put a 6-pack in a guitar case and head off to the hootenannies. And I was playing one night at the Golden Vanity down in Boston. I was, I got in with my guitar case, and they caught me. They basically said, "Kid, you got to get on stage. You got in for nothing." So I had to borrow a guitar. I got up and did a set. I was so nervous. I have no idea what I did, but apparently I did well enough that the owner called me a week or so later and said, "Would you come down and be a substitute folkie? Somebody or other is sick, can't make the show, so would you come down and do a show?" And that's where it all started.
Wow. And then you started recording in 62. Is
Yeah,
that was that a live album, Tom Rush at the Unicorn?
it was a live album. A guy came down to me. I was playing at the Unicorn, and a guy came and said, "Would you like to make an album?" And I'd heard that before, and nothing had ever come of it. So I said, "Yeah, okay, sure." Didn't have high hopes, but he showed up. The next time I played, he brought this tape recorder the size of an oven, dragged it down the steps into the Unicorn, and recorded for 2 nights. And part of what I remember is that he said it was unethical, morally indefensible to intercut, to take the first half of a song from night one and splice it to the second half from night two. And what I learned later, he didn't know how to edit tape, and that was the reason for that. His moral
I,
stance.
I remember those days of splicing tape. That wasn't easy.
No, it wasn't. Do you know what a window splice is?
Yes.
I,
Yep.
I actually saw Paul Rothschild cut a little tiny window out of a 2-inch tape, and replace it with a different note, tape it back together,
Yep.
and
We
that was
used to
pretty
do that.
impressive.
We used to do that in the studio way back in the 70s when I was at the radio station, and I used to watch them do it, and I couldn't believe the things they could do with that.
Yeah, yeah,
Amazing.
it was. I was impressed.
So then this is the real important question for me is your first few records right after the live album. You were playing a lot of blues covers and writing songs that were kind of in the blues vein. What was the impetus for that?
Well, I used to hang out at a coffee house called the Club 47 in Cambridge, and it was one block from my dorm rooms, which made it irresistible. And they hosted, as did all the coffee houses, they hosted the local kids, myself included. but they also brought in the legends, and you could sit in this little tiny 80-seat room and listen to the Carter Family or Flatt and Scruggs and Bill Monroe. But they also brought in a lot of the old blues guys, and I adored the blues guys, partly because I was an English major, and what these guys did to syntax was just heartwarming. But also, they were cool. They were cool, and I was an English major, and I knew the difference. And I used to follow them around, write down everything they said, which was very uncool, but I couldn't help myself.
So who did you meet in those days of
Oh, all
the
kinds of
legends
people.
that would come in? Who did you meet?
Sonny and Brownie, of course. Booker White, Jesse Lone Cat Fuller, Sleepy John Estes. I'm trying to think who else might have come through there. But these were people whose 78s we'd been collecting, and we were just adoring fans. And it occurs to me, it must have been disorienting for some of these guys because they were used to playing the roadhouses in the South with the chicken wire in front of the stage because
And there's
people
no
would throw
chicken
vodka.
wire here at the Club
No,
47.
and now all of a sudden they're playing in a coffee house, no booze, just coffee, to a bunch of white Harvard students who were adoring and totally attentive and quiet. And it must have been weird. But they were all very cool, and you could approach them, you could talk to them, you could say, "How do you do that thing you do?" And they would tell you.
Any special
And
moments that you remember with those guys?
oh, it was, it was one night. This is actually one of my favorite stories. Jeff Mulder was part of the scene, and Jeff adored the blues guys. And there was one night when there were two old blind bluesmen, I will not identify them, doing separate concerts in different parts of town. And Jeff got excited. He said, "I got it. We're going to have a party at my place. We're going to invite these two guys, and neither one's going to know the other one's coming. And it, and they're going to sit down in my kitchen and play blues, and blues history is going to be made right there in my apartment." And he was very cute. And it didn't work. The guys showed up. To my surprise, they showed up. They sat down in his kitchen. They were surprised. What could possibly go wrong? What we didn't know is they hated each other and had for a long time. And they were sitting in Jeff's kitchen yelling insults back and forth across the table. And the English majors are all going, "What do you do? The legends are fighting." And it got more and more heated. And one of these guys finally jumps up, knocks over his chair, jumps up and whips out a razor, said he was going to cut the other guy up. The other guy jumps up, knocks over his chair, and pulled out a pistol, and said, and I quote, "Make a noise." It was it was one of those moments.
Wow, that's quite a story.
You can
So
probably guess who the guy with the pistol was.
yeah, I got a pretty good idea.
Yeah,
So then you have a self-titled record. Before I ask you about that, I was fascinated that you were on Prestige, which was a kind of a jazz label. How did that come about with Prestige, the first couple
it
records?
came about because Paul Rothschild, who was living in Cambridge at the time, and went on to be a big stinking deal producer of the Doors, and
Yep.
but he started out, being part of the folk scene in Cambridge, and he got a job producing for Prestige Records. They were a jazz label, but they also had a blues branch.
Hmm.
Um, they apparently had three different sets of accounting books: the real one, which was secret, the one that they showed to the government, and then the one they showed to the artists. This is rumor, but I tend to believe it. Anyway, Paul got a job producing for them, and I actually at this point was feeling a bit miffed because when I made the Unicorn record, I was the only guy in town with a record, the only local guy that actually had an LP out. So it made me more legitimate somehow for some crazy reason. But then everybody else started getting signed up to real labels. The Unicorn record was recorded by a guy named Danny Flickinger, and he was distributing it out of the back of his Studebaker. taking it around to the local record stores, and that was it. I think we sold 300 copies total. And then other artists were getting signed up by Vanguard and Prestige. And I was starting to feel very left out because now everybody had a legitimate record deal except me. And then finally, Paul Rothschild came to his senses and signed me up to Prestige. And I made that first album for them.
Got a Mind to Ramble.
Yep.
Great album. So isn't
Well,
Blues
thank you.
Songs and Ballads. Both of them. I like both those records.
The story on the second one is that Paul Rothschild left and went over to Elektra Records. And I wanted to keep working with Paul. So I approached Jack Holtzman, the head of Elektra, and said, would you let, I'd like to work with Paul. And he said, well, I'd love to sign you, but you have a contract with Prestige. And I said, well, let me see what I can do about that. Would you let Paul produce another album with me for Prestige to get out of the contract? So I went back to Prestige and I said, I want out of my contract. They said, no way. I said, come on, I'm a Harvard kid. I'm about to graduate. I don't need this nonsense. I'm going to be a lawyer or something. I'm going to quit showbiz if you don't let me out. And they finally said, well, okay. And I said, well, I want Paul Rothschild to produce the album. Just one album and I'm gone. But Paul has to produce it. They said, Jack Holtzman will never let him do that. I said, well, let me see what I can do. Anyway, we went in the studio and recorded Blues Songs and Ballads with, I think, just Fritz Richmond as my accompanist on washed up bass. And then the next week, we went back in the studio with John Sebastian and Al Cooper and a whole bunch of players, and made the first album for Elektra. And the first album for Elektra actually came out, hit the market before the second Prestige album did, because Prestige didn't know that this was in the works. But that's the way I meant.
It's fascinating that record came out right around the same time that Al Cooper was working with Bob Dylan too, 65.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
he was
Dylan
working
was
with you too.
Yep. Yep.
So yeah,
Great
that was
player.
your self-titled record, Tomrush, the first one.
First
for
one
Elektra.
for Elektra, right?
And do you know? I don't know if Al is still working at Berkeley. He was a professor at Berkeley for a while.
Al's not leaving the house these days. He's still living in the Boston area, but I've talked to him. But I've invited him to come to shows, and no,
He
I'm not
doesn't
going
come out
out
anymore, huh?
No, I think he wasn't going out even before COVID came around. So COVID would be yet another reason not to leave the house.
Yep. So then 1968 was the coming out of Tomrush to the whole world with Circle Game. That was the most popular record you put out. And you had a lot of guests on that record of people of musicians who weren't very well known, but they were on your record with you.
Well, the songwriters.
Right.
The first recordings of Joni Mitchell, James Taylor, and Jackson Browne. And I've been accused of ushering in the singer-songwriter era. Rolling Stone said that album did that, which is a heavy cross to bear. But my point is that I wasn't looking to discover anybody or usher anything in. I just needed some good songs. I was 2 years overdue for delivering what turned out to be my final album for Elektra. And here come these three incredible writers with dazzling songs. And so I gobbled them up and named the album, in fact, after Circle Game. Circle Game, I met Joni out in a club in Detroit, Michigan. She got up on stage. She just started writing songs. She'd been Joan Mitchell up until this point. And she just started writing songs, and she came in and asked the owner if she could do a guest set so I could hear some of her brand new songs. Got up and did 4 tunes, including The Urge for Going. Knocked me off my feet. I asked her if she had any more brand new songs because I needed to make this album pretty quick. And she said, no, but give me a minute, basically. And a few weeks later sent me a tape with 6 dazzling songs. And just before the last song on the tape, she apologized for the upcoming tune. I just finished writing this. It's not much good. I'm so embarrassed, but here it is. And I named the album after it. It was The Circle Game.
Do you have that tape still that she sent you?
It burned up in a fire. I'm so sad about that. A house fire.
That would be great to still have that, wouldn't it?
Oh boy. Could be some blackmail potential.
So then 2 years later, I was reading about this and I was like, I didn't realize that you were in part of this Festival Express. Oh, we lost his he'll be back. We lost him for a second. Come on, Tom. See if you can reconnect. If you just tuned in, we are 91.5 WUML. Yeah, we got him back.
You're back. You're back. You froze up.
Oh, I did. Okay.
It wasn't me. It's all your fault.
Okay. I wanted to ask you about 1970 and the Festival Express. I was reading about that.
Oh boy.
I didn't know you were on that. I had no idea that you were part of that.
I'll tell you what little I can remember. It was the best party I've ever been to. This is a train across Canada for your listeners who might not know. And what year was it?
70.
1970. It was a train tour across Canada. And the idea was that we were going to start in the Maritimes and go all the way to the Pacific. But it didn't work out that way because, well, first of all, the train had Janis Joplin and the band and the Grateful Dead and Ian and Sylvia and on and on and on. Eric Anderson was on the train, as was I. But we were supposed to be stopping at stadiums and giving concerts along the way. And in the States that year, there were riots at a bunch of stadium shows. And so some of the Canadian municipalities got very nervous and canceled. So instead of starting in the Maritimes, we started in Toronto. And instead of ending in Vancouver, we ended in Calgary. But it was quite the party. We the train was dedicated to the festival, and the people running the train, the conductors and the waiters and stuff, were used to families on vacation, and all of a sudden they've got this trainload of wild ass hippies with hair down to their waists, smoking all kinds of weird stuff and behaving strangely. We drank the train dry about 200 miles out of Toronto. We were only about 6 hours into the trip and there was no booze left. And we made them stop at this little whistle stop somewhere in a prairie. And we got out of the train and went to the local liquor store and bought everything, every bottle in the store, and dragged it back to the train and continued partying. But it was wild.
Give a little history. Woodstock and Altamont was right before that in '69. So you're talking 1970 in a train in Canada. That's crazy.
Yes, it is. It was quite crazy, and there's a bunch of memories I shouldn't really talk about on the radio, but
okay, it's all right.
But there's one where I was sitting and talking to Bonnie Bramlett of Delaney and Bonnie. They were on the train. And we were chatting away, and Janis Joplin comes running in and said, Bonnie, you got to come with me. I'm doing an interview for Time magazine, and I've just realized you and I are the same person. She was all excited. And so Bonnie got up and followed Janis, and I tagged along because I needed to find out how it was that they were the same person. And Bonnie is telling the interviewer how talent is a blessing, but it's also a curse. It comes from God. God gives you this talent, and you are therefore obliged to go out and share it. You're obliged to go on the road and leave your family and travel around and share this God-given talent, because that's what God wants you to do. Janice, on the other hand, was talking about how great it is to be a rock star because you get laid a lot. And somehow they were the same person.
Wow. So that was 1970. And then through the middle to late 70s, 80s, you were still recording and you were on Columbia at the time.
Yeah, I moved over to Columbia. My contract with Electric was up, and Columbia was making me a much better offer than Jack Holzman was. Um, so we moved over to Columbia. Very different corporate dynamic. At Electra, if you had a problem, you could go talk to Jack Holzman, the boss. At Columbia, if you had a problem, you had to talk to somebody's secretary and try to make an appointment to see somebody, and usually wouldn't happen. Columbia, it was very different dynamic. They referred to my heartfelt masterpieces as product, which kind of rubbed me the wrong way. Um, but that was their approach. This is product. Uh, stuff we're going to sell. And the artist was kind of a money pump, an expendable money pump,
For them, yep.
because yeah, because they could always get a different money pump. And so it wasn't the best relationship, but they had a budget, and they let me make some what I thought were some pretty good records.
Yeah, you made some great records. I want to ask you about Merrimack County. Was that related to the area here, or what was that the title for that record?
Well, I grew up in Concord, New Hampshire, in Merrimack County. I was born in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, um, but only stayed a couple of days because I didn't care for it, and moved over to Concord, New Hampshire, in Merrimack County. And then I ended up living in Hillsborough, or actually Deering, New Hampshire, just in Hillsborough County. But
You know who else used to
Merrimack,
live in Deering? I don't know if you know this, but Danny Klein from the Jay Giles Band lived in Deering too.
no, I
Yeah,
did
he
not know that.
he rented a
I'm no
farm.
longer
Yeah, he rented a
okay.
farm in Deering. I used to work with him. And when I saw that you used to live in Deering, that was the only other person I knew of that lived there was Danny Klein.
Yeah, yeah. No, I had a farm there. I decided couldn't take New York City anymore. I'd been living in New York for a while, and it was just too weird. Um, the final
That's the
straw was,
complete opposite of New York City, Deering, New Hampshire.
oh, then that's exactly what I was after. A lot of my friends were moving. This is early '70s. A lot of my friends were moving out of New York to California because it's where the action was. And I was pretty burned out at this point. I'd been on the road. There was one stretch where I was on the road in 3 years, I had 10 days off, not in a row. I was either rehearsing or traveling or gigging or doing promotional stuff. Um, and I just decided I was going to quit showbiz. So I bought this farm in Deering, New Hampshire, and moved up there and quit showbiz for an entire 6 months before I just got itchy to get back on stage again. But I left Deering. I sold my place. A lot of it went to the New Hampshire uh, Society for the Preservation of Forests. And there's now the Tomrush Forest in Deering, New Hampshire. If you actually go to Google Maps and put in Tomrush, it'll show you the Tomrush Forest.
Wow.
Um,
I
and
didn't
some guy in Connecticut, a handyman, Tomrush the handyman, which is not me trying to make some extra money on the side.
so
Anyway, no, I don't live there anymore. I'm in southern Maine right now.
nice. Southern Maine is beautiful. You
It
found an
is.
even better place.
Well, I don't know if it's better. It's different. I'm right on the Piscataqua River, and I have a dock, and my neighbor is a lobsterman, and I let him park his trawler on my dock in exchange for a limitless supply of lobster, which
There
is
you go.
which is a good deal, and from my point of view.
A great deal. So let's talk about private concerts that you do. And I was on your website and I'm looking and I'm going, you even explain how to do it, what it's going to cost. I mean, everything right down to the details. How
Well,
has
my
that been
thinking,
going? Go ahead.
well, it's been going well. My thinking is that a lot of people might want to do a private concert, but they don't have a clue how to do it, or how to go about it, or what's needed. And so I figured, well, I'll put up a little 1 page, 2 page primer on how do you do this, and it's worked well. I do a few. I don't do a lot of private concerts, but it's fun. It's
I
usually in somebody's yard. Get some friends and family together, and I'll play for a couple of hours for them.
I think it's fascinating that a major recording artist would actually open themselves up to that, to do that, to the, well, it's to your listening audience. It's a great way to go face to face with your listening audience and get to see other people within, as their homes, to get into their homes and to see the
Right.
people.
Well, it's all up at tomrush.com, folks. Check it out. But it was
And,
partly a response to the pandemic and the fact that all these shows are being shut down.
and then you have
I had just
there's a second thing that you did during the pandemic called Rockport Sundays I wanted to ask you about.
Well, instead of going to your home, I'm now inviting you into my home where I sit at the kitchen table and there's a video. We video a song. We actually record batches of them, but we'll put up a song, different song every Sunday, and they stay up. You don't have to watch them on Sunday. You can watch them whenever you want. They stay up for 8 weeks, and then the oldest one is replaced with a new one. But I tell stories, like the Janis Joplin story, and basically have a lot of fun. Matt Nakoa, my brilliant accompanist, is with me on a lot of these, playing piano, playing guitar, singing harmonies, and it's been a lot of fun. And it's actually, been very sustaining during the pandemic. I was suffering from audience deprivation syndrome,
Yeah,
and
I bet.
that was partly the reason for the private concert thing. When the public concerts were being shut down, people were still interested in, getting some friends together outdoors in the yard and having a party. Um, so it was a way to make a dollar, as is the Rockport Sundays. And I'm going to, now that the venues are back open again, hopefully for a long time, um, I'm going to continue with Rockport Sundays and continue doing an occasional private show.
You want to talk about Rockport Sundays? It's a subscription service that people can. Um,
Right.
Go ahead.
Again,
Yep.
tomrush.com has all the answers. You can go there and click on Rockport Sundays. It's through a platform called Patreon, and basically you sign up for $10 a month, $20 a month. There's different tiers, and you get more. At the $1,000 a month tier, you get a lot of attention. Uh, but the $10 a month tier gets you, a song a week, usually with a story, or maybe it's two songs. Matt Nakoa does a song on his own sometimes. We had Jonathan Edwards on as a guest artist for 3 episodes, and I've got some other guests coming up that I don't want to talk about yet,
Okay.
because you never know what's going to happen and what's not going to happen. But um, it's been a lot of fun, and the people that are subscribing love it.
So let me ask you a question about the local folk scene from when you started in the early to middle '60s to today. What's it like today versus what it was like when you started out?
It's a whole different world. Um, back back then, before you were born, um, you had to have a record deal or you didn't exist, basically, because the record
Hmm.
company was the one that would get you played on the radio. They would get you written up in the newspaper. They would, you know, do all those things that helped to sell tickets to shows. And You simply were invisible if you weren't on a major record label. Now with the internet, any kid with a laptop can make music in her bedroom and put it up on the internet, and a lot of it sucks, but some of it's great. Some of it's great, and
You get to hear
there are
any of that?
bands.
Do you get to?
There are bands. I don't. To be honest, um, if I'm in a musical mood, I'm trying to write songs. I've got almost enough brand new songs for a new album at this point, and I'll be trying some of them out uh, at the Bull Run on Saturday.
There you go.
Um, and should we talk about the Bull Run a little?
Yes, absolutely.
The Bull Run. It's a great venue, great food. The show's at 8 o'clock, but come early and have a really fine meal. But I'm going to be playing there with Matt Nakoa, who I've been talking about, fabulous musician. But also Eric Lilliquist and Dean Adrian are going to be joining me. And these are guys that were in a band called Orphan. That was my backup band for a long time, way back in the day. And this is our annual reunion with Eric and Dean. And they'll be doing a couple of songs on their own. And I'm very much looking forward to it. It's an annual event,
Yeah,
and
the Bull Run has
it's a
been
treat.
around a long time.
The Bull Run, when I was at Groton boarding school, my dad taught at St. Paul's School in Concord, New Hampshire. But back then it wasn't proper to send your kid to the same school you taught at. So I was shipped off to Groton School. When my parents came to visit, the Bull Run was the only restaurant you could take the kid to. So I was in the Bull Run back when I was 12, having dinner with my parents,
Isn't that cool?
and now I'm playing there on an annual basis.
And to
Except for
think
last year.
that was an
Last year
old
was good.
inn. That was an old inn before it became a restaurant. I mean, way back.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's got some history. It's older than I am.
Older than
Hard to
all of us.
believe.
Yep. And you're there every year, once a year. That's great.
So once a year, except last year didn't happen. I
COVID.
actually, I had actually just in the beginning of 2020, I had just announced my first annual farewell tour. And I had a T-shirt made up with all the gigs that were going to happen on the back. And then the pandemic hit. And so we just came up with a pandemic version of that T-shirt with 67 shows crossed off on the back. It's also
Wow.
available at tomrush.com.
So let's talk about 60 years. 62 was when the first record came out. You started in 61. So 2022 is technically 60 years you've been doing this. How does it feel to be continue to make new music and do what you do after 60 years?
Well, I truly enjoy playing shows. The traveling is the hard part. That's the work. When you have to drive 6 hours and get on stage and then drive another 6 hours the next day. Um, but the shows are just a lot of fun. I really do enjoy them. And I started Rockport Sundays because I was missing having an audience. It's not at all the same thing though, because I've learned when you tell a joke to a video camera, it doesn't laugh.
Yeah, there's no one there.
But I get feedback, email feedback from the subscribers, which is almost as good. Anyway,
So you reinvented yourself despite what was going on in the world.
I had to adapt.
Yeah.
And I
And
think that's what Darwin meant by the survival of the fittest, was he meant survival of the most adaptable.
I did the same thing with this show and doing these interviews like I'm doing with you. Last year, I was doing everything remote. There was no radio station for me to go to. So
Right.
this was a way to do that, to open up to my listening audience a new form of interview to get the artists to talk about themselves and so they understand who they are in their music.
Uh-huh. Well, that's scary.
It is. But yeah, I just want to
Well,
say thank you very much for taking some time out of your busy day. And before I go, when's you got a whole bunch of songs you're going to be showing off on Saturday? When's the new record? Do you think you're going to have a new record out soon?
I've got almost enough songs. I'd like to start recording with too many songs because inevitably one or two don't work out the way you hope they would. And then the one that you stuck in just for the hell of it turns out to be the star of the show. Um, I might actually record an album at the kitchen table just because I've enjoyed doing the Rockport Sundays at the kitchen table for a whole year. We're coming up on the first anniversary of Rockport Sundays. And then for take two, take the songs down to Nashville once the studios are open and record it down there. But right now, Nashville is a hot spot for COVID, and nobody's going in the studio.
So eventually, once you have these songs worked out to the way you want them, you'll release it. You'll put them all out.
Yeah, but I might do solo versions just to start out with.
That's
Garth
cool.
Brooks has actually invited me to use his studio in Nashville, but it's not open. So
He's a big fan, I read, of yours, Garth.
apparently so. Apparently so. He sent me a video, happy birthday video clip uh, for my 80th birthday last year.
Isn't that great?
Earlier this year, I should say.
What does that tell you about your influence on all of these guys that are out there today?
Well, again, I've never tried to influence anybody. I was actually trying to meet girls primarily.
Yeah, but you have influenced people. You don't realize that what you're doing, your music, the stuff that you write, your songwriting and your music has affected these people that are major artists too.
Well, James Taylor credits me with being a major influence, and I'm flattered by that. Um, but again, I'm just trying to have a
You're
good
humble.
time
You're
making music.
humble. You're being humble about it.
Okay, all right, I'm fabulous. I'm the most fabulous musician that's ever lived. You
Well,
got it. You got me to say it.
some some musicians don't realize that. They could be out there playing all those years and writing songs. They don't realize that how they've influenced other people in the music. And I just wanted to bring that up. That it's great that you have.
The stuff that really moves me is when I get emails from folks saying, "We played your song at my mother's funeral. We played," or somebody else saying,
There
"We
you go.
played your song at our wedding." Um, the fact that it's actually the music is meant that much to people that they want to weave it into important events in their lives, that really moves me.
That's great. So, how people can find you on your website, tomrush.com, right?
Correct. And there'll be a link there. If you click on shows, there'll be a link to the Bull Run
Which
for
is
Saturday's show.
this Saturday night, the 4th.
Saturday night, the 4th at 8 p.m., but come early and get some great food.
Food, yeah, it's great. Everything there is great. The staff, everything.
Yeah, they're good people who love to do what they do, and they're really good at it. So it's a joy.
And it's amazing for you to tell me that you were there when you were 12 years old. That's pretty cool. And you're on all the social media networks too, Facebook and
Uh,
Instagram and all that, right?
right, right. Track me
And
down.
um I just want to say thank you. I really appreciate all the time you've taken.
Well, thank you. It's been fun.
And
Let's do it again one day.
we will. We'll do it again. And good luck on Saturday with all the reunion and everything that you're going to be doing at the Bull Run.
Thank you so much.
All right. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye. All right. You're listening to 91.5 WUML. That was Tom Rush.